I'm Thomas Torrey.
And I'm Justin Moretto.
And we're a couple of friends who have a podcast. And this is episode 3.
3. One too many, in my opinion, because it doesn't, 2 friends? 3 episodes?
2 podcasts.
We should have stopped at 2.
I'm a filmmaker.
I'm a scientist.
And we're 2 friends who've made movies together.
And launched a company together.
And we lost our money.
And our identity.
But we are finding ourselves again.
And this is our podcast.
This is it.
Welcome.
Episode 3, welcome. In this episode, it's Justin's turn to take some dumps on things that people love.
But not on anything sacred, like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, definitely not those 2 things. It's those 2 things. Plus, late in the episode, I promised to edit something out that Justin tells me in secret, but I don't edit it out.
What?
Just keep reading.
And Thomas breaks down the 2 different types of creativity.
And Justin compares writing a project to loving your partner.
Can we go back for a minute to the editing out, though?
So light the candles and draw the bath, everybody. Episode 3 is about to go down.
Oh, yeah.
So you haven't seen Mandalorian?
I have not seen The Man nor The DeLorean.
Are you a Star Wars fan?
Do I have to answer that?
Because I'm not.
Okay.
And I never have been. And people look at me like I have 2 heads. And I was like, yeah, and I saw them. They were fine. I just wasn't drawn to them.
I feel like there's, for me...
Are they fine?
Most of them.
Yeah, most of them.
But you know what? Like, if I had to choose between, like, if I said, like, let me stack up all of the value that you get in, all of the, and I'm not talking about per capita of time or per unit time. I'm talking about total of quality that you get in the entire Star Wars. What is it, 9? I don't even know what that's called, but,
no idea.
Trilogy of trilogies. I would say it does not stack up against Firefly and Serenity. Firefly, the television show, and Serenity, the movie. I'm like, give me those. I don't know how many hours that adds up to, but I have to imagine it's less than the Star Wars saga. And I'm like, you know what? Scratch that. I'll just take Serenity by itself over the entire Star Wars saga.
Serenity's a great movie. Wait, what's the movie? Serenity or Firefly?
Serenity is the movie. Firefly.
That's all I've seen. I've only seen Serenity, and it was great. I was into it.
Well, you don't need Firefly to watch Serenity. It's very standalone, but Firefly is the prequel.
Right, exactly.
Serenity is the movie, is the film that was made. Again, I could be wrong on this, but my understanding, it's the film that was made because the show was canceled.
Yes.
And people needed an ending.
Yes. My point is that Mandalorian is a great time on the couch with your family, a fun show from someone who really doesn't care about Star Wars. But Mandalorian, it works because it does not take itself seriously. It has this really lo-fi, campy quality that it's intentional. And Baby Yoda steals the show. Like, literally, Amanda, she missed season 1. Season 2 premiered, last month when Amanda's home on the couch. And the kids were like, we loved Mandalorian season 1. So the kids are like, oh, Mandalorian season 2. And episode 1, Amanda was like, are you kidding me? I cannot handle a Star Wars thing. No, please. She could not have been more distressed about suffering through Mandalorian. By episode 2, she's like, don't start it without me. I'm in love with Baby Yoda. I'm obsessed with Baby Yoda. Don't start with, and she just, now she's like, can we watch Mandalorian season 1? So that's my wife. So I'm just saying, the show is a 4-quadrant show. Everybody loves it, and it's with good reason. It's not amazing. It shouldn't win an Emmy. It's just fun. It's light. It's campy. They have Bill Burr as a side role. They have all these comedians. They have Gina Carano from MMA and who's in Haywire. They have a great supporting cast. Jon Favreau is the creator. He just knows how to do stuff. It's just a great fun show, and honestly, it's saving Star Wars because all of their big movies are kind of falling flat, or at least not all of them, but Solo underperformed, Rogue One underperformed. They've had to fire the last few directors, and they're just a lot, these big, huge marquee movies. And then Mandalorian comes along. Yeah,
and that, obviously, I feel like there's definitely an interesting topic somewhere in there, just this idea of sort of, I don't know if it's over milking the cow or what it is. But I felt this similarly about Lord of the Rings trilogy. The original trilogy was great. And rereading Fellowship of the Ring, realized how much better the film is than the book. I mean,
Well, you made that fleeting comment before, and I was like, "That's a good topic." I want you to expound on why The Lord of the Rings is not a good book, because I haven't read them. I didn't really love the movies. They're fine. I own them all. I rewatched them all this year with my kids. They're good. They're fine. I don't naturally love fantasy as a genre, and I realize that might be a character flaw, but that's just. It's one of my least favorite genres.
to each their own.
The movies were great movies. I just didn't love them personally. I'm much more inclined towards other genres. But I certainly didn't read the books. But like everybody I know is like the books are sacred.
Oh, yeah.
So you said that, but then I heard somebody else like today or yesterday say something similar about Lord of the Rings, or even maybe it was even Tolkien, about how sort of a little too he's just too much of a sacred writer, the way he kind of handles the English language.
Yeah, I mean, that we're definitely getting, there's a lot of that we talked about there. Tolkien, obviously, I would say in his greater body of work, he can be somewhat like precious, and it just, that's not, I shouldn't use that word in the Lord of the Rings, but it's just, he's very, I don't even know how to describe it. If I could think about it, but that's aside from the Fellowship of the Rings, which is the one that I was, taking a dump on at some point, and but still I hold to. Anybody who says that it's sacred, I would say go back and reread that book, because if you feel like it's sacred text, it's been too long since you've read it. Because what you don't remember, do you remember the films pretty well?
Yeah, I just rewatched them.
So you remember the Prancing Pony?
No.
The Prancing Pony.
Oh, the bar.
That's the bar or the inn where he accidentally slips the ring on, and they all pretend to be in the beds, right?
Yep.
How far into the film is that roughly? We've slipped into another "It's a Wonderful Life"
yeah,
sort of question, but reversed.
Well, I watched the 4-hour long cuts. I couldn't tell you.
It's pretty early though, right? Because every fantasy story always starts with a flight, right?
Yeah.
Like a night flight, and by that I mean just like the heroes have to leave suddenly and go on a journey, right? And so they leave, but it's pretty early in the film, right?
Yeah.
Of everything that happens in Fellowship of the Ring, that's an early sequence.
Yeah.
They just met Aragorn, all that stuff, right?
That's where they meet Strider. Yeah, Aragorn.
Right. That's past the halfway point in the book. Nothing happens.
So it's just belabored world building.
Like Tom Bombadil, the worst character of all time. If you sing another song, Tom Bombadil, I'm gonna strangle you.
This is great.
I don't care if he's fair and yellow or whatever his thing is. But just nothing happens. It's so boring. And to be reading this with an 8-year-old, it's like, sweetie, it's going to get good soon, I promise. Up next, we discuss the types of creativity, and Thomas tries to use a disgraced book as a reference.
At least I didn't take a dump on Star Wars and Lord of the Rings.
I'm pretty sure you did too, though.
Stay with us.
We talked last week, and I had this plan I was going to really buckle down, and I was going to just knock this whole last section of this book out, so that you can read it starting in a couple days. I'm actually surprisingly on track, 2,000 words a day, so pretty happy about that. But in that sort of sitting there thinking about it, it's made me curious how different people get into the creative groove. I'm not like a sports guy, but some things I know about sports is that like baseball players are super superstitious, right? And so like they gotta have the hat or whatever.
They're
it is.
OCD.
Yeah,
Very
and
OCD.
Maybe if I split creativity into sort of the two, I'm sure you could divide it multiple ways, but you kind of divide it into sort of inspirational, where you're like, oh God, I gotta write this down, right? And you go and you type out a bunch of stuff because it just comes to you. But then there is the sort of the manufacture of creativity. It's like, I'm going to go sit down. I'm going to create something. And maybe it's not going to be good, but I'm going to do it. I have like this vision. I don't even know where this comes from, but this idea of like somebody sitting down in front of a nice, neat, tidy desk. They've got their coffee mug and they turn it. It's just right. They got their pen and their paper and they just sit there and like nothing happens. So, I have all these rituals that I do. I'm curious though. We've never talked about this. Like, what do you do when you want to light the candles and spread out the rose petals and get, draw a bath for creativity instead of for Amanda?
You sort of made a fleeting comment about the two types of creativity, which you sort of intuitively mentioned. You said the inspirational one, but then the one when you're sitting down and actually doing the work. There's an amazing book on creativity called Imagine How Creativity Works by Jonah Lear. Jonah was an amazing journalist. He wrote for Wired Magazine. He wrote a couple books. Unfortunately, he misquoted Bob Dylan in the book, and he was kind of disgraced. Like, the book got pulled from the shelves.
For that alone?
I think people thought he was intentionally changing what Dylan said to make a point, and there were some journalistic lines that were crossed. It kind of blew up in his face, and the book got pulled from the shelves. I heard about the book early, and I bought it. That book is a valuable resource for creativity, even if some of the quotes are misattributed or even incorrect because of a lot of the other things. So I think they threw out the baby with the bathwater in that case. We, in the notes for the show, we'll put a link to Jonah and the book if it's been
assuming he hasn't done anything wildly problematic since then.
Correct. I haven't kept up with him, so if he's plagiarizing on the black market, forgive me.
Being a racist, we don't know.
One of the many takeaways from that book was the two types of creativity, and I feel like he even named them, and I can't remember the name, but one is sort of that inspirational, revelatory type of creativity, and the other is the very much more occupational, sort of get it done. The way creativity works is that we have both of these types of creativity that hit us. I've noticed that for myself, there's the type of creativity where I'm just getting the ideas, I'm being inspired. I need to get the revelation. I need to come up with the greater creative ideas, whether it's vision or even if I'm already got the vision and I'm like halfway through a project, I need to stop and step back and kind of get into that revelatory space. And then there's the type of creativity where I've got that and I'm executing and I'm just firing, I'm writing dialogue, I'm writing the script, or if we're on set, all the different projects that we could do that are creative, these things can manifest in different ways. But the creative process has both of them, and it's not just you start with one and then you shift onto the other. You're cycling in and out of both throughout the creative process. And once I understood that, that really opened up my own creative process. And it really addressed writer's block when I would have it. And then all of a sudden it gave me language for writer's block. I was like, oh, writer's block is simply when I'm doing the executional creativity and I'm just done. And now I got to step back and get some of the inspirational creativity. And writer's block happened when it was like I was still trying to plow through the executional stuff. And what I needed was to put down the script, go take a hike, go put on some music, go create an environment to get the inspiration. And so now I have a sense of which silo I'm in any given moment, and I have different types of triggers that I will do or different types of rituals to some degree to kind of facilitate either one of those. Because I rarely will like, oh, I want to go write a script. Let me go hike and think of something. That never happens. I never intentionally try to conjure up some idea from scratch.
Well, and so that's actually, it felt like you were talking about like that the seeding of ideas was something that you could sit down and do. And that's the thing that I feel like, and I kind of feel like that maybe this is sort of the mark of an amateur. I can't generate seeds, right?
No.
The seeds come to me.
Correct.
And then all I can do is nurture them, right? And I don't know where they come from, but I've never, honestly, I've never tried, but to like sit down and like come up with something novel. It's always just like, it's a one question led to another, and then all of a sudden there's a seed there. And then the other is sort of the chasing, right?
Well, and when you reread On Writing that we mentioned earlier, Stephen King has a whole chapter devoted to this, and he agrees. He wouldn't sit down and try to conjure all of his ideas, and he's written, he's more prolific than the average novelist. All of those ideas came to him out of the blue when he least expected it. And then he did the creative work of a writer and nurtured them. When I'm talking about inspirational creativity that I try to create an atmosphere for, that's already presuming I've got the idea. Let me give you an example of when I was writing All the Names We Buried. This original script. So that whole idea was inspired by a single image. I was already sort of itching to sort of make something. It was right after college. I was like, okay, let's get this going. Should I, and I wasn't sitting down trying to come up with an idea, but I was hoping within the next year I would be on my way towards creating a bigger project, whether that was a short. I wanted to write a feature. I wanted to start a career. So I was sort of in this mode of eagerness. But I wasn't intentionally trying to conjure up any specific idea. I watched a trailer for a movie. It happened to be The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, that title. Andrew Dominik directed that, starring Brad Pitt. Incredible film. Roger Deakins shot it, so it looks gorgeous. And in the trailer, there's a shot of Casey Affleck and Sam Rockwell in a wheat field. And I saw that image that somebody else created, that creativity sparked. Seeing that image all of a sudden filled me with this creative urge that said, I want to make a film about two guys in a wheat field. Like I just was overcome with a creative urge to create something new about two guys in a wheat field because of a beautiful image I saw. And I just instinctively knew, I said, okay, I want this to be a feature film. I'm just going to write a feature film, like as opposed to I want to paint a painting or I want to write a song or I want to take a photo or make a short film. It was, I want to make a film about two guys in a wheat field and I want it to be a feature. So I'm going to start writing it. And then from there, I just let the story kind of evolve. And so I had the seed, and then I still needed all the revelatory type of creativity before I could sit down and write. And over the next year, 2 years, I don't even know how long it took. It was a while. The ideas started to develop as I gave them time. It was two guys. It was the side of a road. It was a car accident. Okay, one guy's from out of town. He flips his car. There's another guy. There's a dead body. And I started to piece together, not the plot, not anything specific, not even all the characters, but sort of the general mood, the general tone. For me, the way I write, and I was even doing this to an extent then, but I have really extrapolated it to a very methodical process now of that initial time. I put off as long as I can the executional creativity. Like when I'm going to sit down and start generating pages, if it's a screenplay, I'm going to put that off as long as I can and just try to let the inspirational creativity have its day, have its time. And in the case of All the Names We Buried, I wasn't full-time writing it. I wasn't able to. I was living life. I was working, I was newly married. We had Skylar, a newborn. So it was like...
There was no time constraint on it.
Yeah. Throughout the weeks, throughout the months, I'd get new ideas. I'd get new inspiration. I'd collect notes. Now it's at the point where for the script I'm writing now, I'm actually being paid. I've got a time. So I actually have to set aside time to be creative. And I know I can't just sit down and look at a blank page on a screen and start typing. I need to actually have time for the revelation stuff. So for me, what that looks like is listening to music, going on hikes, going on walks, getting out in nature, doing these things that can facilitate the brain waves moving. And you could probably even speak into the environments we create that really put our mind, our brain in a physical state to be calmer, to be more receptive to ideas. And there's even science behind when we fall asleep, that stage of our brain right before we go to sleep where our minds are opened up. There's a lot of ideas that come in that time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I keep a notepad and pen next to my bed.
When I'm on a hike listening to music, it's not quite to that sort of rhythmic level of brainwave activity, but it's creating an atmosphere to where I'm just in it. Okay, I'm here. I'm thinking specifically about characters or structure or setting or tone. I'm sort of piecing it together. I'm letting it evolve. I'm watching other movies. For this particular project, the one I'm writing now, the Cliff Walk, which I had a set time for, I had a couple months to generate my outline. And the outline is really that process where I'm like figuring out, by the end of it, I've got this 10-page document that's sort of like, okay, here's what the script is going to then write. And it was several months, and it was filled with hikes and music and watching other movies, reading other books, doing all of these other things that was just creating opportunities for new creative revelations and inspirations to hit me that I would curate and collate and write down and then slowly shape into something that I could then transfer over to the executional creativity part when I was ready. All right, now I'm going to take these ideas and I'm going to start doing the building of it. I'm going to do the typing, writing the script. So if someone were to just say, hey, conjure up a script out of nowhere, I'll pay you for it. I'd be like, okay, like give me 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd spend the first month watching movies, seeing what I was interested in, seeing the things I naturally want to say, the things that I'm naturally drawn to, would hopefully trust that something would just come out of it, some idea, something worthy of being told, getting that initial spark. If I'm being forced to conjure something, the good thing is those things are always hitting me. Within any given year, I'll end the year hopefully with 1 or 2 great ideas for a film that I add to my list of here's the films I want to make one day.
Let me ask you a question. We have both been married for almost exactly the same amount of time, and this is in no way meant to impugn marriage or the length of marriage or anything like that. But it's been a long time, and there is the idea of the young man. I feel like that romance is something that happens. It's something that you fall into, right? That's sort of like the lustful, romantic, and it just happens, right? And then I feel like, and I don't want to speak for you, but you get older, and there is a certain amount of sort of preparatory work and things, and then you realize that romance is not what you feel; it's kind of what you do, right? Like the things that you do. I'm going to do the dishes so that my partner doesn't have to do that when they get off work or whatever. And I feel like when I first started writing, I was always waiting for romance to happen to me, right? With my inspiration. And I'm talking about these sort of internal, as we defined it earlier, internal inspiration. My views on love have changed immensely in the last 20 years, right? I used to think that love was just a thing that happened, that you just felt it, right? And then I now I feel like love is not a thing that you feel, it's a thing that you do, right? If you're angry at your partner and you are nice to them, do nice things for them, it will make you remember that sort of enamored feeling, right? And you will sort of remember your love. And I feel the same way, about writing sometimes, that like I used to just wait for it to happen. Now I find that I have to make the bed and do it, nice. But then you have to do everything to kind of get there and not just wait for it. I can't. Because I would find myself there like sitting in front of a blank page and just like, okay. The book that I wrote, the first 100,000 words, I wrote 80,000 of them in 7 weeks. And all of those words were all written listening to one album. And I don't know why. I happened to have it on and it clicked with the tone. It was just, I couldn't get away. I tried to listen to other things and it just didn't work. It was almost once I got locked into that, I needed it to get the next words out. And there were times that I did it without it, but it was like, if I really wanted to get into it, then I would put on this one album. But then it was interesting because then when I went back to write the other part that is like tonally completely different, I couldn't get words to come out listening to that. And so I switched to Kid A by Radiohead. And now that's the only thing I can write to. I have all these different places in my house and outside that I like to write, but I have to have like my headphones and that music. Are you as OCD as I am? Am I weird? Or are there things like that you need?
You're not weird.
Thank you. All right, I'm done. I think we got it for the day.
We're good. So All the Names We Buried is a script that I first wrote, the first draft, in 2007.
Yeah, I remember. It's South, right?
Well, it was called Dust.
Oh, Dust. That's right. Dust was the first.
Then it was Southbound Crossing. Then it was Westfield. Then it was South. And now it's All the Names We Buried. If we shoot it in 2021, it'll be the earliest it would come out. It would have been 15 years from writing the first script. And that's but that's not uncommon. My point in saying that is the script has gone through many iterations, but with those iterations, there have been different sort of seasonal creative moments. There were months when I was writing the script. Right now, I can imagine me sitting in my townhouse in Charlotte working on this script. The script I started when I lived in New York. I remember when I started it in my basement apartment in Bronxville, and the music that I would listen to when I'd write, it was same sort of thing. I've had those bouts where it's just one album. Sometimes it's one song. There have been times where for days I would put one song on repeat because it was evoking such a specific tone of what I was going for. Certainly with an album, certainly with a playlist. For me, it wasn't one song or one album for the script because the script covered so many years, but there were certainly months and months and seasons.
Right.
So in terms of having a music, having song, having a playlist, that type of ritual is definitely common. I know a lot of other writers who are the same way. Are you finding yourself hitting a wall because you're like, I know this isn't finished. There's more to do. I don't quite know what to do. And I'm trying to conjure the creative juice by putting on music. It's not working. I'm sort of stuck. Are you at that place?
I was when I like switched and was trying to write this new voice, this new perspective, and the fear inoculum, it was just like the dry well. Like I went to it and there was nothing there. I think I just had my Spotify on, random or something. I don't know what it was. I don't remember what song it was, but it was something from Kid A. An album that I love, the first CD that my wife ever bought me way back in high school. Like all of a sudden, I just felt like it made sense. And so I went back, I switched over to Spotify and I said, just play just this album for me. And then it was just like boom, boom, boom. And before I knew it, like 3 hours had passed and I had written like 20 pages. I don't think that I look for it. It's not like, let me find that one that gets me in the groove. It's just that when it does, I don't know, it like clicks my brain into the place that it needs to be.
Well, and it's really funny because you're asking about creativity and I'm thinking of all the other ways I'm creative and all the things I do that are creative, directing, editing, and even, designing, graphic design, or even stuff that don't have to do with my job, like, setting up a room. There's all these other things, but we're talking about writing, and
That's a good point.
All of the examples I'm thinking of are writing, and I wonder if, because writing is something,
Mm-hmm.
it's similar to drawing and illustrating, which is you start with something blank,
and then you have to fill in the space.
Right, directing is very collaborative, but you're also you're taking existing art and creating something bigger from it. I think writing a song, painting a painting, writing a script, those are things that start from nothing. So I wonder if there's a similar sort of ritualistic beginning, or the things that we do. And it would be interesting getting a songwriter to talk about their process, because a friend of mine is a full-time musician. He makes a good living writing music, recording music. He's one of my favorite artists because I love his songwriting and his production. His name is John Mark McMillan. He's recorded a lot of albums, but he's also one of the hardest workers I know. He has made it not because he is a gifted artist. He's made it because of his work ethic and how he goes about writing his songs, recording his albums, booking his tours. He is a consummate entrepreneurial businessman in that regard. So it'd be interesting to have him talk about his process. But I know he has a process for writing songs, and I'd be curious at how similar they would be to what we experience writing from a blank page, or talking about an artist.
Yeah, we should get him and a painter on here, and we should say, let's talk about,
especially with like modern art or abstract art, which is very much okay, I'm going to paint now, versus what we're talking about, which is when I get the idea, then I'm going to write. I don't ever sit out on a page and be like, I am going to write a story now. Go. I mean, maybe in an assignment in a writing class. I think your analogy for marriage is a really good one, an astute one. It made me think of a C.S. Lewis quote, who has written some really great literature on love and marriage. He wrote a book called The Four Loves, but he got married very late in life. He has a great quote about sort of the various types of love, but talking about that sort of sentimental, amorous love. And he said, we need that in order to promise ourselves to the other person. But then he said, that is then replaced by a deeper love, which we need to stay married to that person. And it's something that I've recognized, being married for a substantial amount of time, certainly not as long as, my parents, and hopefully we're headed there because we have a, strong marriage. But, you fall in love with someone, you pledge, oh, I want to marry you. You're the one I want to be with. And that exciting, passionate love, it doesn't fade, it just changes. And hopefully it's replaced with something much deeper that then is what is required to last and actually make it go the distance. And in the same way, when we talk about our creative projects, I've heard so many writers, filmmakers, or other types of creatives talk about the projects they select. They might get five ideas, but it's like, what's the one that I can go the distance with, that I can marry? And I've got a lot of ideas for films and writing and directing, I'm not going to pursue them all, because creating something, certainly a novel, certainly a screenplay, making a film, it is a long process. It takes time, years, and it takes a lot out of us emotionally. So we should be doing that with the projects that we feel like we can go the distance with. Just like marriage, I might fall in love with someone. Like when you're dating people when you're growing up, you could feel those feelings, but you want to marry the one that you can go the distance with. And to know when it's hard, I'm going to be motivated to stick with it. So with the projects we create, what are the projects that when it gets hard, I'm going to be motivated not to give up and bail? I've started projects and I've hit the wall and I'm like, I don't like it enough to put in the work to finish this thing. It's interesting when we're kind of curating the projects that we're going to stick with. What are the ones that we know we can go the distance with? And then when we hit those creative blocks, we're motivated. You know what? I don't know the answer, but I know I'm not going to give up on it. And I also think letting the creativity take its time is important. Now, sometimes we don't have that luxury and we're on a time crunch. We have a deadline. Hopefully we could be so lucky as to be hired for projects that have deadlines. That's where I think some of the ritual stuff that I talked about come into play, because it's like, okay, I'm being hired to write this script. I'm contracted for 2 drafts and we have kind of a target date. I got to get to work. I've got to get this done. And if I were beginning, I might just start sitting in a script and be like, all right, let me type. But I've done it enough to where I know, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 months to draft an outline that's going to be really detailed, going to really go through all the beats. And a lot of those hours, a lot of those days, I'm going to be watching movies. I'm going to be taking hikes. I'm going to be listening to music. And I know it's all going to come together. And it did. I've been really pleased with the process. So I think as we do it more, we are able to make room for those moments. But when it gets hard, or when we're feeling stuck, knowing how we can step back, just like, with our partner, you know what, in this time, I need to give them their space. Or this time, no, they need me to call them out. Or this time, we know whatever we're going through with our partners, we inevitably, hopefully, will come to know what are the things that we need in this moment. And with creativity, I think it's the same thing. Our conversation on creativity continues.
And caveat, I use marriage as an example because that is my personal experience, but it's in no way meant to exclude people who aren't married. It still applies.
So stay with us.
As somebody who does a lot of technical writing, the bulk of my writing has always been technical writing just because for school and everything. I would find myself in my early writing times obsessively editing while writing, and it became so prohibitive that I would get stuck, and I would sit down to write, and I would write 10 sentences because I would get stuck, and I would just keep revising, no, that's not what I mean, that's not right. Actually, another one of my favorite authors, Neil Gaiman, I heard an interview with him, and he was talking about his process, and he said that he handwrites his first drafts, and then he started talking about the fact that he's a big lover of fountain pens. That is a quirk of mine. I love fountain pens. I have, in fact, Thomas, I'll show you on the video. I got my favorite 2 right here, locked and loaded. Namiki Vanishing Point right there. And so he was getting into it, his favorite papers. And I was like, oh, that's my favorite paper too. And was talking about handwriting it. And then all of a sudden it became such an interesting idea to me. Obviously, I type much faster than I handwrite things, and I can do it much longer. But the beauty is when he was saying, when you do it in pen, when you're writing it, there is no easy way to just go back and edit it. You just accept it, you put it on the page, and you just move forward. If it's bad enough that you feel like you need to edit it, you're going to know when you type it into to your computer later. If it's not that bad, if it's just a weird in the moment sort of thought, it's not going to occur to you later, and it probably wasn't a big deal anyway. And so I started writing that way. It's been really kind of an interesting change, that sort of tactile connection, brain, hand. I don't know. I'm the neuroscientist. I'm supposed to have an answer for why that has been helpful, but I don't. I just, thought it was kind of an interesting thing. I know that you don't handwrite your stuff, so I'm not prompting you for that, but I just thought that was kind of an interesting quirk. If you have any other sort of weird stuff like that.
Quentin Tarantino handwrites his screenplays for the exact same reason.
Really?
There's probably a lot, and he talks about that, and he handwrites them in long form. And so, because when you handwrite it, not only are you doing the things you describe, but you're also going to inevitably write less because it's taking you more work.
Well, and you're trying to keep up with your brain, and so I find myself somewhat shorthanding. My thoughts are like, that's too much. Just write this.
But you inevitably edit it when you transfer it in. No, I type I type everything that I'm working on creatively, but I don't necessarily have the same obsessiveness. I'll kind of edit as I go and I review, but I'm pretty good about just forging ahead because I get a lot of satisfaction about cranking out pages, and I can write a first draft pretty quickly, and so that motivates me. And then I'll spend time reviewing and revising. So hopefully I will do a lot of that editing. I do journal every morning, longhand in a journal. And sometimes, and that's not a creative writing, that's there's this great book called The Artist's Way, and she talks about doing morning pages. And I know Brian Koppelman's an amazing screenwriter who's got a podcast called The Moment, and he is a huge believer in morning pages. He says it's actually been the thing that's changed his creative process more than anything else, is doing morning pages. And it's literally get up, open a book, and just write. It's pretty stream of conscious, and like write 3 pages, and it just opens up your creativity. It gets you going, and he incorporates it into his life daily. I do it 4 times a week. I don't do it daily. I'm not very religious about it, but I do it as much as I can almost every day. It serves a lot of personal, spiritual, emotional needs, and I think it's doing some creative work, but it's nothing to do with my creative work that I'll do later in the day. But I would only think to do that. I would only want to do that long form in a notebook because I can get away, get to where I want to be. When it's nice outside, I'm by the water. Now that it's cold, I'm in a coffee shop. But even talking about environment, and you were talking about lighting the candles, having the pens out, I sort of, and Stephen King, it's funny, I'm only invoking because I read that book. He talks about sort of the sentimental notion of like he talks about, having your perfect sort of environment for writing and going to like these writers' retreats. He's like, I'm sure writers' retreats are awesome, but he's sort of making fun of them, of having this amazing tranquil setting where you can all write. And he had this desk in the middle of this beautiful room because he could have, he's rich, and he was like, I finally was able to create this serene environment for me to write that I always envisioned. And he was like, it was just ruining my writing. So he's like, I pushed my desk to the corner of the room under the eave. And, he was just like, I just created this workman atmosphere. And he's like, and then everything just opened up. He's like, I just let go of creating the tranquil environment. And I sort of laughed because I daydream about building this little cabin in my backyard where I can just look out into nature and I can just write because, I have an office. The office has no windows. So it's great for like, making calls or emails or editing. It's a great little post-production office, but I don't love writing in there. And I've got this office here at home that I like, but I've kind of turned it my kids' playroom, so it's hard. And so like I wrote this script over the last 3 months at one of 50 different locations. Whenever I could grab time, I would either be on my couch late at night, laptop on my lap. I would either be at that great craft brewery, More Artist that I talked about. I would go there a few times a week and write from there, be at a coffee shop, be at my office. It was very schizophrenic about all the different locations I was writing in. And at first I was sort of like self-conscious, like I'm not getting stuff done. I should be able to just go to one office and focus. But the reality was I was cranking. I was doing it.
Yeah.
I was getting the work done.
I do feel like there's sometimes like there is this pressure that I'm doing this wrong.
Yeah.
I need to do it this other way. And I feel like we should all be disabused of that. Like, if you're doing it.
A great thing that can shed that is when you're getting paid for something with a deadline and like you're desperate for the money. So it's like,
yeah,
hey, cool. Like, and I was in that situation. I was like, okay, this is my Q4 money, my income. It's real money and it's a real gig and I'm going to deliver it on time. And so I wouldn't even get into the mindset of like, well, let me just put that aside and go do something else, and I'm not going to rush it, because my passion projects, they're always in the background, so I can always sort of be sentimental about working on them. But this, I was like, I gotta get it done. And if this month I don't have one place I can even write in, I've got to catch the time, because I'm also working from home, not just because of COVID, but because I'm caring for a wife who's going through cancer treatment. So I'm not even going into my office. So writing at home with kids in a small house, it's like you just get it done. And I was able to just get it done because I sort of had to. And I got to say, it was the most fun I've ever had writing. I just loved it. I loved the material. If it was something I was not into, it would have been hard, but I loved the material. I loved the process of writing it. And I've been super happy with the result.
You know, my writing space is so weird. Like I find myself chasing the sunlight, essentially. My daughter's bedroom has the best sunlight between sunrise and 11 a.m. And so I will find myself sitting on her bed. When she would go to school, I would, she would be gone. I would just go sit on her little twin bed with her little, canopy over me, like sunlight streaming in. And then, lunchtime comes, and then I would move to my office, and then that would lose the light. And I would go to the front porch, and it was like, where is the sun that I can be near? Acoustically, there was no variability. It was just the same, tracks over and over and over again. So it's interesting how the physical space. And the other thing, you talked about going to different places. I've tried to write at coffee shops. I can do data analysis all day long at a coffee shop, or, it was easier when there was less viruses killing people, but that was easy for me. But trying to be creative and like the anxiety of thinking that people might be talking to me or trying to get my attention, I could not focus. And
I'm the opposite. I can write all day in a coffee shop or bar, and I'm here when I'm writing at home and the kids interrupt me.
I mean, that is, I feel like, indicative of our sort of personality differences.
This is true. But look at this room I'm in. Like, I built this room to be my office, and I love being in here, and I've actually loved writing in here. But then when I moved to my Main Street office, I kind of gave this room to my kids, and I only, in the last couple months, to sort of reclaimed it. Now we share it, and I'm able to write here a lot more. And honestly, I wrote the last third of the Cliff Walk probably in this chair, just typing on my lap. And I was really grateful. I really loved being back in here. And it sort of made me wonder, like, man, I'd love to our house is so small, though. That's why I ultimately moved to the Main Street office. So now I just am dreaming about a bigger house, or building that cabin in the backyard. Before we go, we share a couple of recommendations for you, and Justin gives a secret about surviving in the world that I don't edit out like I promised I would.
So definitely fast forward through that part.
Definitely don't.
It's a secret.
It's not anymore. It's about to go public. Justin, what do you got to recommend for our people?
Let me ask you this: do you like to meditate? Have you ever tried meditation? So I mean, in sort of the emptying of your mind and the sort of like the freeing of thought, and like you get in that, that groove. And there are, anyway, have you ever tried that kind of meditation?
Yes. The answer is yes. I did download Headspace, did it for a few days.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I want to meditate more than I do, and I want to sort of find the right groove, but I definitely set aside time to try to focus on presentness, contemplativeness, meditation, being still. I think stillness, quietness is a virtue that would help me, and I'm trying to increase it in my life, and I know. But I still haven't quite found, like, I wish I could say, oh yeah, I use Headspace, 5 days a week for the last year, but I don't.
What I have found is a video game called Beat Saber, and I know I'm late to the party. Beat Saber is a VR game where you put on a headset and you hold two lightsabers in your hands and you chop boxes in half as they fly past you to the beat of house, EDM, trance music, whatever it is. There's actually a BTS soundtrack that, I haven't downloaded yet, but you ever play Rock Band back in the day?
Sure.
How you would just get into it and you just couldn't, and that's what this is like. You cannot think. There is no thought except for blue, right, red, left, up, right, left, and they start coming so fast, and it's like just like rhythmic music that I found it's like so trance-inducing. And I know this is a weird recommendation to start off with, but
to what end? When you're done, do you feel like you've just been at the spa?
it's therapeutic. Like I get to the end and I'm like, I have thought about nothing for the last 10 minutes. You've probably had this experience with music, right? Where you just sort of are like sitting at the piano. I get that sometimes. Or like my wife, she's a drummer.
Flow,
she's just at
baby.
the drums,
Flow.
and she just ba-da-doop, boop, ba-doop. Yeah, flow. But sometimes like I don't want to do arpeggios and scales and stuff. And this is just
That's awesome. So it's like I want to just be in a flow state, but I don't want to be creating. I want to just be being.
I want it to just happen to me and flow over me. So anyway, it's called Beat Saber. It does require, like a VR headset and controllers and all that kind of stuff. But man, oh man. I don't think that they market themselves as a meditation service, but they should.
That's great. We just finished binging a new reality show we were introduced to. We're big Survivor fans. We watched Survivor. We're actually going back to like old seasons because, Survivor's on pause.
I think I know where this is going.
But there's a Survivor Extreme kind of series on History Channel called Alone.
Alone, yep. My in-laws just turned me on to it.
Bro, I think everyone's getting turned on about it because I'm assuming Netflix just acquired the rights to a few seasons. And Netflix, I shat on them for film. Netflix is doing TV right because TV is a very different medium. Anyway, but they got some seasons of Alone, but on Hulu we have all the seasons. And Micah, my brother-in-law, who is a hunter and a forester, he turned me on to it. He put it on over Thanksgiving break, and we watched like the whole season 6. And then we came home, we watched all season 7.
Is that the one that just ended? 6?
Yeah, the most recent. The 106 was
100 days. 100 days.
The 100 days was season 7.
Okay, that's what my in-laws. We picked it up halfway through the season, and then we were like we all went to the beach together and sort of binged it through the end.
It's a really well-produced show. As someone who has produced content and television and documentary, it is an impressive show because all of the decisions are just the right creative decisions to make a show like that. Give the contestant their own cameras so they are truly alone. A lesser show would have had hidden crews. This stuff is filmed. They give them GoPros and they filmed their own stuff.
I will say there is one mistake that every contestant, I haven't watched all the seasons, but I did go and I did a quick search because there was one thing, and I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to tell you what it is because I'm saving it for when I go on the show. I am an amateur survivalist at best, but I think there is one thing that every contestant from the beginning has gotten wrong, and it is like the number one reason that people have been eliminated, and I cannot understand it. It's so obvious to me.
You're really not going to tell us?
I'm really not going to tell you because I got it. I'm not going to, because I'm going to say this, and then, Susan and Jim out there are going to go and they're going to take that and they're going to go win. And then things will never be the same. Once that innovation gets out there.
You tell me and I won't edit it in. I'll just edit my reaction.
I don't believe you. You can bleep it out. It is the fact that everyone builds a house. What animal do you know that survives in that wild that lives in a house?
As opposed to a hole?
A hole in the ground.
Well, what
a den?
Did Rand?
So
the 100-day guy?
He was the closest one. He was the closest one who ever did it. He was the closest one. But also, don't put your goddamn fire in the place where you sleep. Because what was the girl's name? Who
so many people
was a homesteader.
Burn their house.
The people burned their stuff down. But what was the girl's name? Who was the homesteader? Who I could not believe when she called it. She so obviously was suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Oh wow.
Everything about what she was experiencing, I was watching this, I was like, this is classic carbon monoxide poisoning. Her sort of over emotional, like the more that people start to have those.
Well, how do you get warm?
Emotional,
how you just have to get like one of those Sub-Zero? It feels like it gets so cold in the Arctic that your sleeping bag isn't enough. You need a fire next to you.
Right, sort of like Arctic wolves and polar bears and porcupines. They need that fire to survive.
But you're saying don't sleep.
I'm kidding. Those animals don't have fires to live. but if you have a down sleeping bag, we have better technology than they do. But you know what else? You can go to Siberia, right? And if you go 24 inches deep, the ground is 63 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
If you go and like almost none of them take a shovel. Take a goddamn shovel and dig yourself a hole. You go in and you go up, right? And then now you have the earth because the earth is dense and holds heat well. Air is thin and it carries heat away. And so when you have thin walls and 6-8 inches, that's thin compared to 4 feet of earth. And I cannot believe that nobody has dug a den like a dog, because they survive in the wild. And that's what they do. They just dig a hole.
I was thinking too, they're all obviously hunters and carnivores, but as I've kind of migrated towards plant-based eating, I've been thinking, nobody's eating, I mean, they're eating berries, but can you harvest that grass and the pine? I mean, can you eat those plants and really not even worry about killing the meat? Like fish and plants you could live off of. Why do you need to?
Well, but what plants would you eat?
Well, there's grass.
Right,
like
there's grass.
Wheatgrass, pine. I don't know, bark. I mean, I don't know. I'm wondering, is there nourishment in trees?
You can't eat grass. And the reason is because the plants, all plants have cell walls. That's one of the differences between plants and non-plants, cell walls versus cell membranes, right? But the cellulose, the parts of the plant, that we can't digest them. It's one of the reasons that animals that do eat grass are called, ruminants. And to ruminate is to re-chew over and over again, right? They got flat teeth. They grind it. They're breaking down those cell walls. You hear that thing about how, yaks and cows have multiple stomachs, right?
Right.
It's chambered because it takes all this digestion. So you can't just go get grass. It will fill you up, but it will not nourish you.
Interesting.
But what you can do is you can do things like ferment it. And you can do things like, if you look at sort of nomadic tribes and stuff, they will save the stomach acid of animals and they will put grass in it. And where do you think haggis comes from?
I don't know.
Do you know what haggis is?
No.
It's food that you cook in the stomach of a sheep.
Why would I know what that is, Justin?
Haggis, it's a Scottish staple. It's like it's like Scotch whiskey and haggis. Those are the things that, they are sort of known for better or worse.
Could you make a flour? Like harvest that, grain, dry it up, make a flour and cook a little.
How much do you know about flour production?
About that much.
It's very labor intensive and it requires a lot of separation skills. That whole, old thing about separating the wheat from the chaff, they would throw it up in the air in a high wind to carry the heavy parts away, and then to carry the light parts away and the heavy parts would fall back down. And then you got to grind it. And it's a lot of work to produce.
Okay. This is the most interesting thing we've talked about all day, is just hearing you could just go on your expertise. It's just great. It's fun. It's just like competency porn.
But what I will say is that, there are a lot of roots that people overlook. And that is the thing that I feel like, people should be spending the initial part of their time is like every dandelion you see, you go and you get that. Every thing that is alive, you go and you get it. And if you have to slow cook it, stew it for fucking 2 weeks, you do it. And you turn that into a vegetable broth.
Bro, I want to see you on that show.
I couldn't do it unless I had somebody with me. The thing is, I think I have the skills. I could survive. I could hunt an animal. I know how to field dress an animal. I don't have the will. I could do it if I had to. If there was no other option. But if I knew that I had a red button.
You could survive the apocalypse. You just can't win the $1 million on a loan.
Right. But see, the funny thing is, my wife is the opposite. She 100% could. She will put her nose to the grindstone and know that there is a ripcord and not pull it because she wants the thing that's at the other end. But then doesn't have any survival expertise, except for the fact that she is an amazing nurse and, could take care of sepsis in the wild and, knows about herbs and all that kind of stuff. But, the point is, I feel like we'd make a good team together because I just don't have the grit that she has to actually see something through to the end.
That's awesome. So if they do a married couple's amateur survivalist alone season, you guys would be perfect.
Sign us up. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please help us grow our audience by subscribing to this podcast wherever you listen to yours, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or elsewhere. Rate us, review us, tell your friends about us.
And if you want to stay connected to us throughout the month, you can follow our Instagram account at twofriendspod.
And then, of course, get in touch with us at twofriendswithapodcast.com, which will have all the footnotes from this episode and links to the resources that we've discussed.
And if people want to see my film work, you can go to thomastorrey.com.
They sure can. They want to see what's up with our company, Bad Theology. They can go to badtheologypictures.com or follow us on Instagram at Bad Theology.
We'll be dropping episodes every other week, so keep up with us.
And again, as always, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Two friends.
Keep it classy.
Your audio seem all good?
I think so.
Cool.
We'll see.
Before we go, we share a couple of recommendations. 2 picks. That's